International cooperation is fundamental to global energy transition. Africa-European cooperation represent diverse opportunities yet to be fully realized. Deep decarbonization through green investments and innovative renewables solutions represent new, exciting areas for joint action. How can Africa and Europe combine their strengths? How can African-European cooperation be accelerated?
Welcome back, everyone, to this ministerial panel on enhancing African-European cooperation for a greener future. As our keynote speaker, Kenyan President Ruto, reminded us this morning, Africa has vast renewable energy potential that offers huge economic and social benefits, but its path to carbon neutrality remains a long one, not least because of underinvestment. According to a recent study by the International Renewable Energies Agency and the African Development Bank, only 2% of all funds invested into solar, wind, hydro, and geothermal actually flow to Africa. The African Development Bank itself is working to change that and help catalyze an energy transition made in Africa. The bank has stopped funding coal projects and is now putting by far the largest share of its financing for power generation into renewables. With 43% of Africans still lacking access to power, it has put a focus on social justice. And we will hear more now from the president of the Africa Development Bank Group, Akinwumi Adesina, formerly Nigeria's agriculture minister. He is also winner of the World Food Prize. The floor is yours, sir. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Honorable ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, guten Tag, good afternoon, everyone. I am certainly very honored and delighted to speak to you today at the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue. I wish to start by taking this opportunity to thank the government of Germany for its strong support for the African Development Bank Group, of whom I'm president, especially on the bank's 7th general capital increase, and for the major contribution from Germany towards the 16th replenishment of the African Development Fund, as well as your support for our work on renewable energy. I'd like to commend the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Development on its new Africa strategy. Gerd Muller used to run this, and I used to think he was actually a football player. But then I said, well, Germany actually got a minister who was a football player. And so he said, no, I'm not Gerd Muller. And so he signed me, got a ball and signed it for me. So I keep it in my office. So, but I do say you keep scoring development goals. So well done, my brother. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, as we discuss energy transition, as it relates specifically to Africa, let me state from the onset that Africa is completely energy deficient. The continent accounts for only 6% of global energy use and just 3% of global electricity demand. Africa has made, however, important progress in terms of access to electricity, with the population with access to electricity increasing from 44% to 56% between 2010 and 2020. Now, despite this progress, close to 600 million people still do not have access to electricity, and close to 1 billion people lack access to clean cooking energy. To meet SDG 7 goal, Africa needs to connect 90 million people annually to electricity in the next 8 years, and to also shift 130 million people from dirty cooking fuels every single year. Africa's energy transition is such a huge task, and it will cost an estimated $100 billion a year between 2020 and 2040. Universal access to electricity is possible in Africa if the continent fully unlocks its massive potential in renewable energy sources. The declining cost of solar and wind energy technologies, coupled with more affordable energy storage systems, makes renewables cost competitive and presents a unique opportunity for Africa to underpin its future energy needs based on renewables. The African Development Bank is spearheading efforts to unlock Africa's vast renewable energy potential. Potential is important. We can list it, but we don't eat potential. We can't power anything with potential. We have to unlock that potential. As you just heard, the bank no longer funds coal energy projects. Since 2016, 86% of our investments in power generation are now in renewables, have been in renewables, including transformative projects such as the 510 megawatts Nu Ouazzazate solar project in Morocco, the world's largest concentrated solar power plant, and the 310 megawatts Lake Turkana wind project, which is sub-Saharan Africa's largest wind farm. The bank's $20 billion Desert to Power project is currently developing 10,000 megawatts of solar power all across 11 countries in the Sahel and in East Africa. It will provide renewable energy for 250 million people in terms of access to electricity. And when it is completed, by the way, it will be the largest solar zone in the world. The projects are currently underway, being implemented in Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso, Mauritania, Eritrea, Niger, of course, includes northern Nigeria. Through the bank's Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, which we call SEFA, we are investing in green baseload power, as well as mini-grids and decentralized off-grid energy systems. I'd like to thank the government of Germany for its 190 million euros support for the SEFA program. The bank is also supporting the just energy transition in South Africa, which currently relies on coal for 80% of its energy supply. And we are currently working with the government of Senegal. The minister is here, it's good to see you, as part of the Just Energy Transition Partnerships initiated by the G7. Ladies and gentlemen, while we must and will do all possible to expand the use of renewable energy, especially given Africa's enormous potential for solar, for hydro, for wind, and geothermal energy sources, the intermittency, however, of new renewable energy sources, in particular wind and solar, makes it currently impossible to guarantee security of supply. Natural gas is therefore a key part of the energy mix for assuring security of supply and is a critical transition fuel for Africa. Transitioning from coal to gas generation will reduce emissions in Africa by about 40%. Estimates also show that if sub-Saharan Africa, which if you exclude South Africa, were to triple all its electricity consumption using only natural gas, you know how much it will contribute to global emissions? 0.6%. That's it. Similarly, shifting from fuel wood, charcoal, and kerosene to cooking to the use of liquefied petroleum gas will lower emissions, saving forests, biodiversity loss, and millions of lives, especially of women and children that die from these heavily polluting cooking fuels. Also, Africa's natural gas reserves has become a new major supplier of gas to Germany and the rest of Europe, especially as they deal with the aftermath of the Russian war in Ukraine on gas supplies from Russia. We have a saying in my native language, I'm Yoruba. It says, the eye that cries must see at the same time. Africa is now a solution to Europe's energy needs. So as we think of energy transition, we need to think holistically. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa is well positioned to help to lead the revolution on clean energy industrial value chains because it accounts for 80% of the world's platinum reserves, 50% of the cobalt reserves, and 40% of the manganese reserves, and of course, huge resources for graphite and lithium. Africa is therefore a crucial source for minerals and metals for clean energy value chains, including electric vehicles and utility-scale battery storage. And we shouldn't just export, because we're used to doing that in Africa, export everything raw. That's the fastest way to poverty. We must and we should manufacture. Africa, I submit, is the perfect place to build lithium-ion batteries to power German cars. We must also unlock Africa's potential for green hydrogen, estimated at $1 trillion. Some African countries have already started developing green hydrogen projects. To support this development, as well as drive the growth of green infrastructure in Africa, the African Development Bank, Africa 50, and the African Union have launched what is called the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, or otherwise called AGIA or AGIA. AGIA, ladies and gentlemen, targets to raise $10 billion to accelerate just and equitable transition to net zero emissions. I look forward to Germany's strong support for AGIA. Finally, the African Development Bank is investing in clean cooking technologies that lower emissions. Our investment, equity investment in Spark Plus Africa Fund, supports the development and distribution of clean cooking energy solutions, including biomass stoves, advanced biomass fuels, liquefied petroleum gas, ethanol, and biogas systems. It will deliver clean cooking solutions for about 2 million households and reduce around 16 million tons of CO2 equivalent of carbon emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, we all have a collective responsibility to do our part in limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. What Africa needs is a lot more financing to support its drive to universal access to energy. Global dialogues on Africa's energy transition must be pragmatic and not ideological. While Africa must accelerate the development of its massive renewable energy sources, Africa must also be given the time to transition and allowed to use its natural gas as transition fuel, just like it is the case in Germany, as well as Europe. What is acceptable for Germany and Europe must be acceptable for Africa. There must be equity, justice, and fairness on energy transition. Thank you very much. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, President Adesina. You may kindly take your place, and we will take your messages with us into our panel. Intensifying cooperation between Europe and Africa could, in fact, help to realize many of the aims that President Adesina just outlined and offer a win-win for both sides, given that Europe has extensive experience in realizing renewable energy projects and is also hungry for affordable clean energy to decarbonize its industry. So how can such cooperation be enhanced and shaped to benefit both sides? That's the question we'll be addressing in this very high-powered panel with political and industry leaders. And it is now my pleasure to introduce them, and I'll keep the introductions very short to maximize our time. I'll begin over here on the right. Yes, your right, dear audience. Abubakar Aliyu is Minister of Power of Nigeria. Welcome. Gerd Müller is Director, I'm sorry, I've got it backwards here. You are the Minister of Power for Nigeria, excuse me. And Gerd Müller, next to him, is Director General of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization and formerly served as Germany's Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development. In the middle of the panel, Dr. Ahmed Mohina is Deputy Minister for Strategic Planning from Egypt. Next to him is Ruth Nankabira Sentamu, Minister of Energy and Mineral Development for Uganda, and Sheikh Niani is Vice Minister of Petroleum and Energies for Senegal. And joining us virtually is Achim Steiner. He's Administrator of the United Nations Development Program, joining us by remote. Before we begin with our first round of discussion, dear ladies and gentlemen, we want to get your opinion on our topic. You can take part in our Slido poll. I'm hoping that you still have the access to the website from this morning. We will now hopefully get a slide up showing you the barcode for the Slido poll. You see it there. So if you haven't gone online yet, please do so. Here's our question. Imagine Europe would increase green investment in Africa, while Africa would increase the supply of green power-to-X products, such as hydrogen, for Europe. How do you judge the socio-economic opportunities for both sides? First possibility, big for Africa, big for Europe. That's the win-win. Big for Africa, small for Europe. Second possibility, small for Africa, big for Europe. Number 3, or small for Africa, small for Europe. And I see some results coming in, but we're going to go back a little bit later and look at them after everybody's had a chance to vote. Let me now start with some questions to the panel with the request that you do keep your answers under 3 minutes each, please. That way we can hopefully get in 2 rounds of discussion. And I'll begin here, if I may, with Minister Aliyu. And Nigeria is Africa's largest economy, home to one of the fastest growing populations in the world. You have adopted an ambitious energy transition plan, but progress isn't easy. What are the main obstacles that need to be overcome, and how can cooperation with Europe help you to overcome them? That should be on. It is indeed.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Well, as you rightly say, Nigeria has a population of over 200 million people and an economy of over $500 billion. So you can see from this perspective what that may mean. We have developed a pathway to our target of 2060 carbon net zero, which we committed at the COP26 by Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari, and we are working towards that to net zero by 2060. But we have a vision of 30-30-30, which means raising our capacity of electricity to 30,000 by 2030, and 30% of that will come from the renewable, which we are working towards that. And we have, as rightly said by the president of the African Development Bank, we have recognized gas as our transition fuel, which we are canvassing for more acceptability, because we have our energy transition plan, which is first of its kind in Africa. And it is estimated that it will cost $1.9 trillion to net zero, out of which $410 billion will be for above business as usual. And it is further broken down to $10 billion per annum up to 2060. So the big elephant in the room is how to finance the energy transition plan, which we have gone around to advocate for support. Now that we are in Europe, we are also saying Europe should come and partner with us and assist us to drive this energy transition to fruition. $10 billion per annum. This is what we require. And we'll be able to generate in the plan about 5 gigawatts of solar every year. And that is not all. These 5 gigawatt of solar per year will have like 4.9 going to the grid. So then the rest, which is around 400 megawatts, will be on the distribution. So coming to the grid, which will be used for the energy distribution and transmission across the country, which is our backbone, the energy transmission grid. The solar, we have a policy of having it on off-grid and the mini-grids, which will later be integrated into the national grid. Because at the moment, we are trying to expand and strengthen our grid to a level where all the solars that are isolated will be integrated on the grid. So this is the position where we are. And we are having massive expansion of the grid to strengthen it using renewable, but from hydro. At the moment, we have 700 megawatts hydro, which is completed. Is going on the grid. Gradually, we hope to commission it in next month, which is the Zungero hydroelectricity power plant. And it is coming in with about 700. So we want to use the hydro, which we have a lot of potentials, to raise our base load. By the time we use the hydro in raising our base load, then we will begin to integrate the mini-grids that are bound the country. And so coming back to your question, where you say, how can you help? Yes, we need you to support our development with concessionary finances. You need to...
But specifically, sorry, but just with an eye on the time, specifically, infrastructure, off-grid, what would to you be the biggest value for European cooperation? Where do you see the biggest need for support?
Yeah, perhaps let me begin by saying
briefly, if you
concessional capital-led investment. This is one area. And just as you supported South Africa and Vietnam, and I think is it Indonesia, in the just energy transition partnership, you can extend same to Nigeria. That will, we need Europe support in that regard. That will also help in leapfrogging our own efforts to fruition.
Thank you very much. Let me go right over to Director General Müller from UNIDO. And European cooperation, in fact, is a very important pillar in the UN's program, Third Industrial Development Decade for Africa, which UNIDO coordinates. And I know that you see renewable energy technologies, in fact, as a very promising lever, especially for SMEs' access to clean energy. So can you tell us a little bit about how cooperation with European investors can serve that goal?
Thank you so much. First, the Foreign Ministry for putting Africa in the center of this conference, because Africa is the continent of the future. And it's this... Yes, and it's the partner. Yes, because of this huge growing population, the young generation,
exactly.
This innovation in this continent and the resources. And that we have to know. And we must think globally. Energy and climate, a solution is only possible with partnership with Africa. And UNIDO is the UN Organization for Industrial Development. And we are something like a platform for technology, for knowledge and investments transfer. And the message for the Europeans here in this meeting is please use this network, bring technology, knowledge and investments to the African countries. There is a huge potential in the field of energy, but they need this cooperation. And what Adesina mentioned, he has the money, he is the man of the money. This morning, Foreign Minister Baerbock mentioned worldwide the transition, the green transition needs capital. She mentioned a figure about 5.7 trillion per year. That is the figure for transition. And Africa is a big part of this. It's a huge capacity. And, but as Adesina mentioned, 600 million people do not have access to electricity still now. And this continent will grow by 2050, population will double, and the big question is, how is it possible to decouple economic growth and CO2 emission? And the answer is, we do have the technology, we do have the knowledge, but bring it together. And UNIDO is this platform for cooperation. And thank you all Africans, all of your countries are member states with UNIDO, and we are with you in this question.
Just briefly, if I may, because you called it a platform, and we're talking about win-win here. So tell us a little bit, just very short, if you would, about whether Europe can also learn from Africa when it comes, for example, to off-grid solutions. Because amongst the decoupling that needs to be done is decoupling access from infrastructure for all those rural populations that cannot wait to get access.
I will underline win-win. Think in win-win situations. That is very, very important. When I look about the investments in hydrogen, still now there are worldwide 650 projects are already planned, but only 5 are planned with African countries together. That we have to change. We need this win-win situation in a close cooperation, and that is what must be even the signal from here. And the political signal must be solidarity. That means even a greater financial solidarity. Look, the triple crisis, pandemic, climate change, and the consequences of the war hit the Africans hardest. The industrialized countries, they invest trillions to stabilize their economy, even Europe. And there's no additional single dollar supporting the African continent. And that we must change. And therefore, I ask for a African pillar with the EU Green Deal. That would be a clear signal for Africa from this conference.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned hydrogen. I'd like to ask Dr. Mohina to talk a little bit about that. At the COP27, which of course Egypt hosted, you announced a strategic partnership with Europe on renewable hydrogen. You're also working with the European Investment Bank on the Nexus for Water, Food and Energy that you launched in Sharm el-Sheikh. Why did you choose Europe as your partner in the energy transition, and where do you see the biggest benefits, especially in regard to green power-to-X exports like green hydrogen?
Thank you so much. And first, I would like to say that we are in Egypt. We are very honored and very proud that we succeeded to host and organize COP27 on behalf of the African continent, to give a clear message to the global and to the global community that African continent and African countries capable to host this conference, and to give a clear message that African continent ready to help and ready to cooperate with the world to solve the climate change problem. And regarding the Egypt-EU cooperation, we have a very good and strong cooperation with the European continent many decades ago. Depending on the geographical location of Egypt, near is very close to European continent, and depending on our previous cooperation with Europe. Many of areas of cooperation, Europe is helping us in our strategic direction of energy, helping us to launch the strategic strategy for Egypt in the field of energy in 2016. Targeting to maximize the share of renewable energy to be 42% by 2035, and also they are helping us to update the strategy now for 2040 to raise the share of renewable energy more than 60%, maybe as a one scenario of our strategies. Also in the field of green hydrogen, as you mentioned. Egypt now is finalizing our strategic strategy in the field of green hydrogen, targeting that Egypt it will be one of the leaders in the field of green hydrogen in the region, targeting that to export green hydrogen to the European market. We know that European market targeting to produce around 10 million ton of green hydrogen and import around 10 million ton. So we are working very hard on that. We signed 23 MOUs with very big developers, 9 of them from European market, and also we signed 9 framework agreements, 4 of them from European market. European market is a very big market for green hydrogen, so we are targeting that to export green hydrogen to European market, and also to interconnect from electrical interconnection with the European grid to export green electricity to the European countries in the near future. Egypt has a very big potential and very good resources in the field of green hydrogen, and we can one of the main exporter of the green energy, green hydrogen to the European market in the near future.
Thank you very much. Let me go now to our virtual guest, Achim Steiner, and at the IRENA, International Renewable Energy Agency Assembly earlier this year, you said development through decarbonization is going to be the great driver of opportunity. On the basis of that reasoning, UNDP actually is implementing the Africa Mini-Grids program together with the African Development Bank, aiming to de-risk solar energy mini-grid investments in 21 countries in Africa. Can you tell us more about that development decarbonization nexus, and also where you see a role for African-European cooperation, especially in the mini-grid sector?
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to join such a distinguished panel. I think much of what I would have said in principle has already been said by the previous speakers, and I think it goes to the core also of where we need to focus today. Climate change is not a freestanding problem in terms of Africa's development. Much of what my dear colleague Dr. Adesina said, but also my previous panelists, points to the fact that Africa can both be at the center of an energy revolution in terms of state-of-the-art decarbonized technologies, but as we have heard, also be a increasingly significant provider of energy, electricity, and the capacity to produce, for example, green hydrogen for the global energy market. So much of what we would be considering right now is a way in which Africa can overcome a singular challenge. And I think this has a lot to do with this conference also. My dear colleague Gerd already spoke to it, and others. financing becomes critical. Africa in the last 10 years has only had about 2 to 3% of global climate investments, even with the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environment Facility. We see that many private sector investors are very reluctant to step forward. So much of what we are concentrating right now is, in a sense, helping through, first of all, de-risking the national investment conditions, the regulatory frameworks for African countries to be more attractive and interesting for private sector investors, domestic and international, but never leaving sight or losing sight of the leaving no one behind principle. Many of those people we often speak about on the African continent, the 600 million or so without access to electricity, happen to still be living in the rural areas. So mini-grid programs become also a shortcut to providing access to electricity, a fundamental driver of development, whether in the rural or in the urban areas, for industrialization, for rural communities and the rural economies to develop. Right now, 21 countries are part of the Africa Mini-Grids program. They have a component of the regulatory framework review. Secondly, investment-ready propositions in order to attract up to $65 billion of private equity and private sector investments, but also to use de-risking tools. And this is where Europe, the European Union, Germany's Instruments for Development Cooperation, I think become very critical, because the risk perception of Africa remains punitively high, unjustifiably so, but this is how financial markets work. But the Africa Mini-Grids program is not just a small contribution to securing Africa's access to electricity. In fact, if these 25 countries pursue the mini-grid programs that are now envisaged, 265 million people could be connected to electricity, fundamentally changing their capacity to produce, to leverage power for development. It would also contribute ultimately to building the renewable energy infrastructure that Africa needs in order to be an energy secure, but also an energy competitive continent in a world where decarbonization is going to define global markets. So in our work today, we focus as much on the technology end as we do on the financing and regulatory end. Let us also remember, and I end with this, that this is an extremely difficult time for Africa. Fiscal space extremely constrained. We've already heard about it. Borrowing capacity in many countries exhausted. There are a number of countries already pay a fifth of their government revenue just to service their loans. So we also need to look at Africa with a differentiated perspective in how to accelerate and co-invest. And this is the motto that UNDP brings to this question of development and climate finance. It is a matter of co-investment, not simply to lend countries more money, but to co-invest in an accelerated transition, first of all, to cleaner energy, but massively expand also access to clean and affordable electricity. And that's very much at the heart of our climate promise and our work that we're doing with the Africa Mini-Grids program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Achim Steiner, and I know you will need to leave us soon, but perhaps we can squeeze in one more question to you if we're lucky. Let me go over now to Ruth Sentamu, and we'll stay, if we may, with the off-grid and mini-grid issue. ADB President Adesina mentioned access as a very crucial challenge, and in fact, that is certainly true in your own country. Some regions have, with rural communities, have less than 50% who have access to electricity. Your government, therefore, has made it a priority to change that. Solar energy as part of microgrid and off-grid systems could help. But is finance, in fact, a bottleneck for projects of that type? And what kind of mechanisms are you trying to work with to leverage capital for such solutions?
Thank you very much. First of all, on behalf of my delegation from Uganda, I'd like to express our gratitude to the government of Germany for this arrangement that has been well organized, which is giving us an opportunity to share our experiences. I bring you greetings from Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, and I'm placing an invitation to all of you to come and visit. Secondly, Uganda attained her political stability in 1986. And at that time, our generation capacity was 100 megawatts. So we've been walking a journey of increased access to electricity by putting in place the necessary regulations and strategies. And as I speak now, access to electricity in Uganda is 57%, out of which 19% is on grid and 38% is off grid. So our robust national electrification strategy is going to help us achieve 100% connection by 2030. So we have opened up space for public involvement in electricity generation, transmission, and distribution. We are decentralizing electrification. And we are targeting access to electricity by the communities which are far off the national grid. And that's when we talk about the mini grids. Working with many development partners, and I'm very grateful for the government of Germany, GIZ, KfW, and others, we realized that we need to open up to real and genuine access to finances. You very well know that the investment that you put in generation and distribution contributes 60% to end user tariff. We have worked around the clock to make sure that we determine the renewable energy feed-in tariff. It is at 7.1 US cents per kilowatt hour. But this is still expensive. It cannot be affordable by the communities. And when you sit here and discuss about access to electricity, you must take care of affordability of this electricity. You will end up stranded with infrastructure where people are connected to electricity, but they cannot afford to use it. So true meaningful access to electricity must mean affordability and reliability of that electricity. So the government of Uganda is trying to make sure that we come up with projects that can make the users use this electricity in productive manner. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we've been hearing about carbon credit, about money that we can invest in power generation, but we are not seeing it. The question you have put across has an affirmative answer. Finance is very critical. Where can we get this money from? Where is it? How can we access it? Like President Ruto said this morning, Africa has untapped potential. Europe has the technology. You know how to get access to these finances. Why is Africa not assisted to get access to these finances? It is critical. I mean, affordability is critical. How can Africa be helped to develop, exploit responsibly her natural resources, to get money, to invest in renewable energy, so that we use our own money? We are not poor. We have the minerals. We have the resources. We have discovered oil. We need help from Europe. We don't need resolutions to stop us from developing our natural resources. No. We need to be assisted with technologies that will help us exploit our petroleum resources responsibly so that we can get money to invest in renewable energy, which is clean. This is what most of European countries have done. You have exploited your natural resources. Some of you have done it irresponsibly. Africa is crying for getting money to invest so that we don't come here and beg. But we need your support to make sure that we use what we have to exploit the sun that we have, the wind that we have, the geothermal that we have, the nuclear potential that we have. We don't want resolutions that stop us from doing that exploitation. Africa needs the technology that Europe has. Europe needs the resources that Africa has.
So there's the potential win-win. Thank you very much.
It is a potential win-win in that way.
Yeah. let's make it happen. Let me go straight over. Thank you very much, Minister. Let me go straight to Vice Minister Nyane, waiting patiently there. Senegal, of course, also has very excellent conditions for renewable energy. And when Chancellor Scholz visited there last year, he noted the potential for Senegal to produce and export green hydrogen to Europe. So a couple of questions on that, if I may. First of all, as in some of the other countries present here, a sizable share of Senegal's population does not have access to electricity at the moment. So how feasible would green hydrogen production be under current conditions? And could it generate broad-based social economic benefits? You too have a growing population. Would you expect benefits from green hydrogen production and export to flow to those young people who so badly need jobs?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. In Senegal, we, as you was mentioning, develop renewable energy since these last years. For instance, in 2012, we was only having 7% of renewable in our mix, and this 7% was mainly from hydro. And in the last 10 years, the government was making huge effort to develop renewables, and now we are about 30% renewables in our mix. And the government of Senegal created two agencies, very important agencies. One is the agency in charge of renewables, and the other agency in charge of energy efficiency and economy of energy. And the two managing directors are here, these two gentlemen with the red ties. And we are developing this strategy for renewables. And as you was mentioning, the Chancellor Scholz come in Senegal last year, and even the President of the Federal Republic of Germany come also. They both come last year in Senegal. This is due to the great cooperation between our countries, thanks also to our ambassador that is doing a great job here. And also the relation between Germany and Senegal, for example, for green hydrogen. We are currently having a study financed by the government of Germany with KfW, where we are seeing how we can manage to implement green hydrogen in Senegal, to see about regulatory framework, to see our potential for green hydrogen that can help our country also to continue to have a big mix. But I want also to mention our potential in terms of resources, because as you may know, we discover gas in Senegal, and we are planning to export 2.5 million tons per year of LNG in Europe. So the relation between Europe and Africa, like the time of today, is a natural relationship. We are linked by history, and we are linked also by geography. So we need to work together, and working together, we need to listen together and to understand each other. For understanding each other, I mean people need to take into account our constraints, our targets, because we have challenges in terms of access to electricity. We have challenges in terms of reduction of the cost of production. So this one, people need to understand it and to add in the energy transition, because we are talking about transition. In this transition, we need to develop our country, to give access to electricity, because someone that don't have access to electricity, you cannot explain him that he have to do economy of energy, he have to do transition or whatever. So we need to focus on it, and this cooperation should be a win-win cooperation where we are helping our countries to go to access to electricity and also to do reduction of cost of production. And this will go with renewable, but this will go also with gas to power. And in Senegal, this is the strategy we are currently doing, gas to power, renewable, and studying green hydrogen, how to add green hydrogen in our mix, to have a balanced mix, and also to continue the cooperation with Europe for the technology, also working about clean cooking. Clean cooking is important because we have in our continent many women dying because of this cooking with coal. So it's a whole package that people should consider. We cannot go only 100% renewables, or we need to consider our mix in our country, our needs in terms of development. And in Senegal, for our case, is gas to power, renewable, and studying green hydrogen. But the key message I want to say, for me, the win-win cooperation from now for the energy transition is Europe to decarbonize and Africa to industrialize. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on that note, one word, green hydrogen, good job creator or not?
Yeah, we are studying this one. It will enable us to go in another step for, to be more clean in our mix. And I think that we have, for example, a power plant of around 300 megawatt that will be built with Siemens, who is German, and they plan to have hydrogen, in this kind of turbine. So in the future, we will go with hydrogen, but after our gas-to-power strategy and renewable implementation. And I remind you that we are from 7% to 30% now, which is a big gap, and we look forward to continue developing it like that.
So you used the words win-win. I want to see what the audience had to say about win-win, and then we're going to do a super quick final round of comments because unfortunately we are out of time. But let's get that audience poll result up if we can, please. Technical team, thank you very much. And we asked whether Europe would increase green investment in Africa, Africa would increase the supply of green power to products for Europe, and whether we think that would generate socio-economic opportunities for both sides. And 71% say yes, it would be a win-win, big for Africa and big for Europe. We have 13% who think that it would be big for Africa and small for Europe, the same amount, interestingly enough, thinking small for Africa, big for Europe, but the overwhelming majority clearly thinks there is a big win-win here. Now, let me ask that we all please very briefly pick up on that, and my final question to all of you, to tell us your single priority for making Europe-African cooperation a win-win for the planet and for people. So many of your countries with burgeoning youth populations, young people who clearly need jobs, and how you see the energy transition figuring into that. But I'll start with Achim Steiner, because I know that he has already overstayed the time when he had to get to another meeting. So your top priority, if you would, please, Achim Steiner, for how we can make this a win-win for planet and people.
Well, I think you've heard from all the panelists that telling each other what to do is never a good idea, especially when you're not doing it yourself. So I think if you can get away from trying to tell one part of the world what to do about its energy future, that's already a very good way in which to create space for where shared interests arise. And the simple major formula in my mind is Africa needs financing right now, as long as even pioneer countries such as Kenya had to borrow at 10, 12, 14% on the financial markets, when the world was telling it not to develop that wind power farm, not to develop the geothermal power that is part of its backup power infrastructure today. As long as that continues, Africa will not be able to, first of all, close the gap in terms of access to affordable and clean energy. And secondly, it will also not be able to accelerate development. So financing has to be critical, but it has to be on terms that are cognizant of the fact that Africa is being asked to do something in 10 to 15 years that others took 50 to 100 years to do. That is our shared interest, and therefore focus on the financing, bring down the cost of capital, bring more concessional finance, and you will see the renewable energy sector flourish on the African continent, while transition solutions will be really the sovereign choice of countries. But let's be very clear, the future is one of decarbonization. Even fossil fuel development right now can only be a transitional strategy. I think for partners such as Europe, the win-win is in massively co-investing on the African continent. And I think that is where both public and private finance need to focus. Thank you so much.
And in fact, you very modestly did not mention the fact that UNDP's Sustainable Energy Hub, together with IRENA and Sustainable Energy for All, has created the climate investment platform to do exactly what you described, to provide concessionary de-risking finance in order to leverage other funds, including, of course, those from local institutions in Africa. So many thanks, Achim Steiner, for that. Let me now go straight down the panel, asking all of you to share your top priority for European-African cooperation in the energy transition, making it a win-win. So straight down the panel. Minister.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe only to say it in another way, but if I am to say what everyone has said suffices, I think I'm right. The major thing, the challenge that we have is how to get the finances to drive all our plans. If we can allow access to finances on more humane terms, I believe we already know what we will do. Africa has a lot of potentials in solar capacity. Studies have shown that we have like 10 terawatts of solar capacity in Africa, 350 gigawatt of hydro, 110 gigawatt of wind, 15 gigawatt of geothermal. So this should attract the investors to Africa and come with the finances, and you need to support them. You don't need to support all the investors with concessional finances so that they will be more competitive when they come to Africa with other investors. And let's work together as one nation and one global world to improve Africa. It's time for you to give back, just as my sister has said, to give back more than you have taken from Africa in those days. You have industrialized for 2 centuries, and you have reaped the benefit of that. I have said this last year on this stage. So now it's time to give back. If we can cover our space as Africa and have our own atmosphere, we will not be bothered much because our emission is only 3%.
As we heard, yes.
But we have been infested by the word called global village, where most of the emission, where 90-something% comes from, and it affects Africa. So you need to have understanding, you need to have considerations. The developed countries need to have consideration, and they need to be fair and just in the partnership. So we need to develop this partnership based on these laid down foundations: justice, equity, and fairness.
Yeah.
So this is my final word. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Over to Director General Müller.
We need a Marshall Plan with Africa. That's it. And solidarity, really solidarity. And that means share the benefit. Hydrogen, minerals are not for Europe at the first. No, first is energy, electricity, hydrogen from Africa for African countries. That is the message. And then maybe Europe and industrialized countries. Share the benefit means invest in local processing industry, job creation in African countries with technology and investments. And ladies and gentlemen, what is this market in the world? Think about Chevron, Exxon, Shell. In this crisis time, they earned additional, the profit additional last year was 120 billion. Where is the global solidarity? Where is the solidarity with the developing countries? The pledging conference at the ADC conference 10 days ago, I just returned from there. The result was 1.2 billion. The global oil companies earned in this global crisis time 120 billion. So where is the global solidarity, and where are the facts, and where is the fulfilling of the promise of the G7. Think about this 100 billion promise for climate protection. So a Marshall Plan with Africa, that would be the great strategy. Thank you.
This is not the first time you've made that suggestion, and it's a very good one indeed. Thank you very much. Deputy Minister.
I would like to build on what Her Excellency Dr. Ruth said, that the resources and the potential in Africa. But unfortunately, there is a shortage of finance and technology and so on. But the finance and shortage here in Europe. So we need to work together. We need to help all of us to achieve our targets together. I think if we can work on the concept of win-win situation, we can achieve all of our targets to secure electricity, to secure energy for the young generation. But also we need to work on the justic manner that Africa is suffering from the development for all generations, so we need to help all African countries, and also we need to help the European countries to secure electricity for them, especially under the energy crisis now in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister.
Thank you very much. I think His Excellency Ruto put it better for me when he called for genuine partnership. Genuine partnership. Can we sit and try to exchange our shoes so that we fit in and feel how comfortable or uncomfortable the shoes are? With the energy crisis in Europe, would you come out and criticize somebody who is using coal to make sure that people don't freeze to death? So by exchanging our shoes and try to fit in, we will be able to appreciate how comfortable or uncomfortable these shoes are. And as Africa leapfrogs, we shall need the hand of Europe to help us not to crash as we leapfrog. Because if we crash, we will not crash alone. We will crash with everybody. So genuine partnership is all that we need, and I know that it can make us achieve a great deal. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Minister Sentamu. And last word goes to Vice Minister Nyane.
Thank you. I will be very short because I know we're running out of time. But Europe is 100% industrialized, 100% job creations and so on. Now it's high time that Europe to decarbonize and Africa to industrialize. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. A powerful message from all of you in this panel. Thank you. Let's give them a warm round of applause.